Welcome to Fostering Godlike Sexuality at Home. Our goal here is to empower parents to teach their children to see sex in a godlike way.
My name is Brigham Elton. I'm a pornography and sexual addiction counselor who've helped thousands of people overcome even the appeal of pornography. And I'm hoping to get out in front of this and try to help parents to set up their homes to chase godlike sexuality from the beginning.
My name's Andrea, a mother of 4, and I'm learning alongside all you listeners and excited to have these discussions. Thanks for joining us. Okay, it's been so fun doing these podcasts and getting them out there for you parents and families to listen to. It's been an awesome opportunity to generate new ideas about like what we want to offer for you guys and like discussions we want to be having, and to get feedback from some of you listeners. So like one of my favorite pieces of feedback that I got was that this mom was like, hey, listening to your podcast out loud with my kids around brings so much discussion in our house. And then she just like talked about how like her kids ages like 8 to 17 are all listening to her trying to learn and improve and prepare for this part of parenting. And she's like, my 8-year-old seems the most comfortable with the idea of sex, you know? Yeah. I love that because like we talked a little bit about that in one of our episodes. I think it's just like the younger they are, the more comfortable they are with these ideas. And then like for an older kid to see a younger kid learning it, like takes away a lot of the fear around it as well. And it's just like this family dynamic of like, oh, this is an important part of life. Like, let's learn about it. Let's grow. Let's make choices of how we want to think and behave. Yeah,
it's been cool for me to get feedback as well because I have gotten that similar like mindset of like, oh, I can do this. You know?
Yeah.
That like, I think so many times like, we see this as this giant checklist and it's like, okay, let me check this off. And you don't feel super comfortable or confident. And it's just like, okay, I did it and good luck. You know, like, hope you can swim out there. Like, good luck in the pool, you know? And like, to hear these parents go like I have confidence. Like, I can do this.
Oh, there are things I can do here.
Yeah, totally. And like, we really love the feedback. Like, and there's a spot for that feedback on our website. Like if you go to the website and then podcast at the bottom, there's like an email field that you can ask us questions. We'll be doing a mailbag episode. Like I have like 5 or 6 questions already and that I've like identified that I think would be good for us to hit.
Cool.
And we love the feedback and we would love to answer any questions you may have.
And things that you're learning that like we can share.
Totally.
Here.
Yeah, because like honestly, again, we succeed as a community, and we would love to share your stories. You know, because like we learn from each other's stories, and so if you have a story you would love to share, like we would love to have access to that and like put that out for others to learn from.
Cool. Yeah.
Today we would like to spend some time talking about like how to approach a teen and how to like start conversations with the teen about like what's going on in their dating realm, really any realm. Right?
Yeah.
Like just trying to like, how can I start these conversations with my kids and don't just get this like, I don't know, right? And get just like the wall that we get from teens sometimes.
For sure. I think oftentimes, at least my teens, and probably for good reason, kind of shut down. They think they're like about to get lectured or like, oh, mom's going to tell me what she thinks, or she's like, wanting to know what's going on for her own reasons, you know?
Totally. Like, what's her angle?
Yeah, what's her angle? Yeah, what's the angle?
And like, where do I need to be defending here? Or what does she know? You know, like, I remember those conversations with my mom being like, what are you're not doing good at this, Mom. Like, just tell me what you want, you know?
Yeah.
And so as we go over this today, like today we're trying to go over some principles and talk through some examples, but then we will also have some other podcasts that are like, hey, listen in on this conversation.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it'll be so cool for parents to hear kind of like how you've developed this process for talking with teens and like helping to enter into their mind and their world and their values by first like talking about their culture and then moving into like, what about their close group of friends? What are things like with their close group of friends before asking like, what do they think, you know?
Totally.
And,
I think I just want to highlight that process you just mentioned, right? Like there really are like 3 layers here, right? Like the top layer is like, what is going on at your school or your peers, like not specifically your friends, but just like, what do you think people are doing that are your age, right? Then we move to like, okay, like what about your friends? Like, are your friends dating yet? You know? And then finally it's like, okay, like what do you think about that? Like, do you want to be dating yet? Right? So we start with this like, do you think kids in your school are dating? To like, are your friends dating? to like, do you want to be dating?
Yeah.
And that progression makes all those questions seem safer. So we're going from like culture to friend group to their individual values.
Yeah. And like highlighting that principle is like creating safety in the conversation. I think it's important to highlight that the goal is to learn about their world.
Totally.
I know like for me, when people seem really genuinely interested in just learning about me, then all of a sudden, like I feel comfortable talking, right?
Totally.
And so as we approach our kids with these conversations, if we really genuinely can like shift our mindset or like think of like, how do I get into this space where I'm just wanting to learn about the world versus like judge or condemn or like make fun of or joke about their culture.
Their world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like one thing you mentioned that I think is important is like most parents do a lot. Notice it's a lot easier with someone else's kids.
Yeah, for sure.
know?
Like when I was serving with the youth, it's always easier to talk to other people's kids and be like, oh, wait, what are the cool words that people say now? And oh, how do they ask to dances? And oh, that's interesting. We did it this way. And I just feel interested and I don't feel as like emotionally invested in like, oh, what is happening?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and it allows you to approach with curiosity. And so like our goal is to get to that mindset anyway. Right? Which I just want to tell parents this, and this is a hard thing to remember. But like if your kid is thinking about what they believe or their culture in your presence, they are actually considering in their head, what would my mom say? You know? Because like you're gonna ask a question like, oh, are your friends dating? And they're gonna go, is my mom gonna judge my friend for being in a relationship? And they're like thinking what they think you think about their realm. You know? And so like if you can get your children to consciously think about their culture in your presence, you'll be already doing the teaching by saying nothing.
Yeah.
And so my advice to you is say nothing, because it'll actually make this kid feel more like, oh, this is just like my mom's just curious.
Yeah.
Like it's not like she's trying to like work an angle because she heard about this thing at school and she's trying to stop me from doing it.
Yeah, totally. I think another way that like I've noticed that like my kids maybe seem a little more reserved with these conversations or like, oh, they do not want to have this discussion with me. Like I'll kind of end it, right? And then like I'll come back to it at some other time, but I'll be like really soft about it. Like a really one question. If they answer it, then I end that conversation before it feels like it's a drag.
Yeah.
And just those little moments of like, I'm going to ask a question about your world and your life.
Totally.
I'm going to let you answer and I'm going to go, oh, interesting. And then I'll be like, hey, will you help me make dinner? Da, 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 right? I'm not going to drag that conversation on. All of a sudden my kids start to feel like, okay, I can participate. I'm not going to be dragged along. I'm not going to be cornered, right?
Yeah. And I love that you're like inviting them to do something with you. You know?
Yeah.
Because then like the time together isn't about the conversation. It's not like, hey, can we have a talk?
Yeah.
You know? Like everyone has those moments. Like even in my relationship with my wife will sometimes be like, hey, can we talk? And I'm going like, oh.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. You know? Right? But like we talk all the time. Right? It's normally not about the talk.
Yeah.
You know? And so like if you can do an activity and then have the conversation be part of the activity, that's so much easier than like the talk is the activity.
Totally.
Because you just increased the pressure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I think it'd be helpful to identify some like awesome opportunities to have a conversation like this, and then like how would they look?
Okay,
right?
Cool.
So like one of these things like that I see are like school dances, right? Like school or church dances, right? Like you're sitting in church and all of a sudden it gets announced that like, hey, we have the New Year's or the Valentine's or the spring dance for the stake, you know? And like, that is an awesome opportunity to learn about your kids' culture.
Yeah. Like an easy entry question might just be like, hey, are your friends or are the other girls in your young women's class or the guys in your quorum, are they interested in going to this dance?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, like what's the vibe? Are people like, oh, my mom's going to make me?
Yeah.
Or are they like, woohoo, like I'm so excited, let's get some fits, you know?
And I think too, like if you live in a place where like you have a lot of kids in your kids' world, right? Like you have big schools or big wards or things like that, then sometimes asking a spectrum like are some kids, what are some kids like and what are other kids like, and giving space, because I know like sometimes my kids don't like being cornered into like saying that anything is one particular way.
Totally.
I like to be able to give some spectrum.
Yeah, which is awesome. And like you can, again, like the goal here is to learn like how do kids think about dances.
Yeah.
Like, especially church dances. Right now we're talking about church dances. Like, how do kids think about church dances? Are they like excited? It's a chance to hang out with my friends. Are they like, wow, this is going to be so awkward. No one dances, right? Like, this goes to so many questions, right? Like, do people actually dance?
Right.
Like, do people actually couple dance?
Or is there like a kind of person that goes to a church dance, right?
Yeah.
Is there like a type of person? Or is there like a lot of different types of kids that show up?
Right. And then like, what kind of music do they play? You know?
Yeah.
Like, and do they try to teach you guys dances? Or is it just like, good
show
luck?
Up and whatever happens, happens?
Is there food there? Like, honestly, there's so many questions you could ask. Like, do they decorate?
Yeah.
You know? Like, how many leaders are there? Are they just like all on the outside standing, sipping their drinks, talking to it, looking at you?
Or if people don't really want to go to church dances, why? You know, why do you think they're not interested?
Yeah. Right? All of these questions are they're just about, they're curious.
Yeah.
You know? And sometimes you might have to break a little ice by talking about like your culture.
Yeah, I love that. Like when my kids give me the like, well, I don't really know. Because like they're just not, that's usually oftentimes like to me an indicator that they haven't really, they're not just really thinking about it that much. But if I can be like, oh yeah, like I remember I really loved going to church dances. And it was really fun because guys would ask me to dance. And I loved that part of it. Then that gives them like I can actually think about this.
Yeah. And that one line isn't like, you're not dumping at them. This is the decorations and this is who went and this is what music they played. It's like, it's just like, you know what? We really liked it because I would get asked to dance.
Yeah.
You know, and like I would say something like, I really liked it because like the dance was a meetup spot. We would spend 20 minutes there and then we would leave and we would go do like fun donuts in the parking lot or whatever.
Yeah.
You know? And like, giving that short little something then helps the kid go, okay, this is just like, one, it's safe, right? Two, it's just like, this is just a casual, like mom's just curious.
Yeah. And there's no right answer.
Yeah. And that's really like where the safety that we want to bring, right? Because eventually the kid's going to start talking about the school dance. I mean, or the church dance. We're talking about church dance, the church dance, right? And as they start speaking about it, they're going to start going like, what do I think of that? And you'll see it happen to them where they're starting with, oh yeah, this is who goes and this is who doesn't go. And oh, really? Like and then I would be like, that's interesting. Like, it's interesting that like these people feel like they fit more to church dance maybe than these people. And they'd be like, and then kids might actually even say like, oh no, that's not right. Like people don't feel like they don't fit. Yeah. They just like think they're cooler than that. Right. Right. And like now this kid is now considering their culture. Yeah. Which is the whole dream. You know, like the goal isn't that you like find out that, oh my gosh, like people are doing this at church dances and so my kid can't go. You know, like that's not the goal.
Like we don't come in with this like protective, like I'm here, I'm trying to protect you from your culture.
Totally.
Mindset.
Right. Because like, honestly, even terrible cultures, like if they're thought about, can create awesome humans.
Yes. We talked about this, I think, in one of our previous podcasts. Like darkness can push you towards light. Totally. Anything, whether the culture, you know, the good and the bad of the culture, because every culture, our own cultures and our kids' cultures and the kids after that are going to have good and bad. Yeah. But just being aware of it and talking about it and consciously forming values is going to allow that culture to be a teaching tool.
Yeah. And that's the goal. Use the culture as a teaching tool and let it just teach them. Like, don't try to be the teacher. Just like let them and their consideration of it teach them.
So cool.
Let's try to hit maybe some other moments that you could bring up a conversation like this.
Yeah. So like, I think that I'm thinking of like one of my kids that's in junior high right now and is like a younger junior high. And so they kind of are that like, we don't really talk to girls or we don't really talk to boys kind of, you know, mindset. And just getting a feel for like, oh, like, you know, when you go sit down in a classroom, do you actually like choose to go sit by guys or do you like not really care? You like, doesn't matter if I'm by a girl or a guy. Yeah. But going at that first from culture, right? Yep. So if I were to back that question up, then I might ask like, have you noticed that like mostly just guys congregate together and then girls congregate together somewhere else? Or do they mix often? Yeah. You know?
Right. That's a great question. Like, I don't know. Like, honestly, this is a time we could notice this all over. For me, it's really noticeable at church and Sunday school where like the dudes sit on one half and the girls sit on the other. Yeah. You know? And I would just be like, look, I noticed this at church. Like, is this true at school too? Like at school at lunch, like is it mainly men and then mainly women that all sit together? Or like, is there a lot of mixing going on? you know?
Yeah.
Because really, young kids, they're pretty mixed friends, right? And then there becomes this split,
Separation.
right?
Yeah.
And I think helping a kid to notice that split is really powerful.
Totally.
You
I
know?
really like something you just did there is an awesome skill I think that I want to highlight for parents here. And that is like entering into their culture by saying, I've noticed this, or like, I heard another parent tell me this. Do you think that's true? Or have you noticed that? Like, that's a good way to just bring an awareness to a kid that might be like, oh, I don't know, you know, or like, why are you asking, or something like that.
It's really safe too. Like, even like sometimes like I'll hear from parents and I'm like, honestly, I heard this from a parent and I honestly like kind of don't believe it. Like, is this really real? You know? And now like that kid isn't going like, oh, my mom's working an angle. That kid's going like, oh, my dad is confused.
Yeah.
And is like, wants to know if this is real. Like, do kids actually say skibbity jibbity or whatever they say now, you know? Yeah. And like, that really brings, again, the pressure off and allows a kid just to think. Because the goal is to create processing. Right? And so like, we have to decrease pressure if we're going to create processing.
Yep. Awesome. I think like another one of these situations that gives us an opportunity to ask questions about their, physical intimacy or relationships or things like that is like, it's Valentine's Day tomorrow as we're recording this. And so like, that's another good one to be like, hey, what are the expectations for some people at your school? Like, do you see a spectrum of like, are there some people where like it's a highlight of their couple, their coupleship or whatever? Or is it like, do people like give gifts to each other? Is that a thing? Do people hope to receive a gift or like a note or something?
Yeah.
What's that like?
Yeah. Awesome. And like, just again, these like, let me learn. Like, what is the Valentine's Day culture? You know? Like this week with my clients, that's been my question is I asked the girls, like, what do you think girls expect on Valentine's Day?
Yeah.
And then I've asked the dudes, like, what do you think dudes expect on Valentine's Day? You know?
Yeah.
And even just for adults to go like, honestly, I've watched so many guys go, oh my gosh, like I do expect sex on Valentine's Day. You know? And for girls to go like, oh, actually, I do expect flowers, dinner, a date, and maybe a little gift. You know, like I expect all those things. And then I feel pressure to sexually engage with my partner. You know? And like just for them, adults, to consider their culture led to so much learning where they're like, this isn't the culture of Valentine's Day I want in my home.
Right.
Like I had multiple adults end up saying to me like, I guess this is where we are, but I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't want to be like, I had the males said like 3 or 4 times this week, like, I don't want to be someone who expects sex. And I don't want to be someone where I'm like, okay, I'm doing this romantic stuff, trading in for like a special sexual experience. Like it can't even be I'm like, because I
can't
even
be
asked,
normal.
like,
it's got to be a Valentine's sex.
Like if we have 1 to 10 and 5 is your normal sex, like are you expecting something? They're like, yeah, I'm probably expecting like a 7.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, oh, you know, because then she's expecting a 7 on a date. He's expecting a 7. You know, it's just like, and it snowballs.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And like to watch an adult do this same thing where they're like, oh my gosh, like, is that the culture I actually want?
Right.
You know? And then go, no, I don't want that. And then I watched a couple this week, 2 of them actually, have this conversation about like, oof, I do not want this to be Valentine's for us.
Oh, so cool.
You know? And then they were hesitant, look at me like, can they talk about this? And I was like, yeah, go ahead. Like, what do you want it to be?
Yeah.
You know?
Decide together.
Yeah. Like, let's like at least verbalize what you want Valentine's to mean in your, and like allows them to look at the culture. Like one thing that's crazy about our teens now, right, is we have a world culture. Like, thank you, the internet. And the internet has made everyone's culture pretty much liquid across the nation. Right? They now need to take more. We want them to own their culture and create their own.
Yes.
Within that.
Yes. Because like values are being created. Like they are adopting a value system. They are like creating one in their head, but it's how much of it is done consciously is what's up for debate, right?
Totally.
And like where we want to enter in is to create conscious awareness for how you are developing your values.
Yeah. Like my whole goal is for my kids to consciously decide their values in my presence.
Mm-hmm.
Because then if I'm there, they're considering what I believe.
Yeah, they're at least thinking about it.
Yeah, and if they choose to do something different than me, great.
Right.
You know?
Because they chose it.
Yeah. I just want you to be the chooser, not just to be someone who gets like, it's just rudderless in this freaking ocean. And then whatever TikTok shows up reshapes who they are.
Right. Because the world's culture is so liquid now too.
Yeah.
And there's such a spectrum of culture available that like I don't think they are very aware of what their culture is oftentimes because it could be one thing or another. Like there's just a lot of
sometimes they try to fit in on every scale, right?
Right.
Because that culture is so giant. They're trying to fit in everywhere. I'd just like to run through a couple like question progressions of starting with culture, then moving to friends, then moving to them as an individual, right? Like we just kind of went over this Valentine's Day one, right? Be like, okay, like what do people do for Valentine's Day in your school? Would kind of be a starting point. Then it's like, okay, like what are your friends doing, right? And then finally is like, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Right? Like that progression would go from overarching, pretty safe, like, oh yeah, people do this. This is crazy, and like I would try to start with some kind of humorous stuff that I remember from my school,
Right.
Right? And then we would do a little bit of friends, and then what do you think about that? Right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So I think like another one would be like, do people feel like dating is more of like a serious thing, or do people like date just for fun?
Yeah.
Like how do you, if somebody's going on a date, does it mean something more than just friendship, or like what is that like at your school?
Totally.
And then like moving into like, what about your friends? Like, do they think dating is like a big serious thing, or are they like, oh yeah, it's just fun. Like I got a date and we did this thing and it's like no big deal.
Yeah.
You know, and then like, well, what do you think you would want dating to be like, or what is dating like for you if they are dating?
I like that progression. I think it could be similar with like a kiss, right? Like do you think people in your school are kissing other people? You know? And is it like a few people that are loud about kissing? And so it seems like it's more, or do you think like it's actually a lot of people are actually kissing in middle school or whatever, right? And then it would go like, what about your friends? Like, are your friends doing it? And like, do you think they would tell you if they did?
Or do they talk about it?
Like, is it a soft brag, or is it like a secret, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have, you know? And then like, what do you think, right? Like that'd be a heavier, what do you think?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I would. Like another kind of physical intimacy one would be like, what if you saw people holding hands? What would you think about that relationship?
Yeah.
Would you think that relationship was pretty serious, or maybe they were just like starting off? Would you wonder about it? Would people talk about it?
Yeah.
You know, and then like, what about in your friend group? Like, do people talk about like wanting to hold hands with somebody they like?
Yeah.
Or have they like, are they talking about it or do they not talk about it at all?
Yeah.
Right? Like, is it not a thing?
Totally.
And then what about you? What do you think it would mean if you held somebody's hand? Like, what would you want that to mean? And then maybe I would like backtrack it like to me a little bit. Like, I remember thinking that if I was going to hold someone's hand, it was going to be like this big deal. Right.
Yeah.
And then I remember like later on feeling like, oh yeah, it wasn't like that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Kind of giving them some space to like see what I think about it for a second if they're not quite sure.
Totally. Especially if they start to have like pause, right? Like there's a difference between guarded and pause.
Yeah.
Right. This pause is like, oh, I'm not sure, you know? And like maybe then hearing what you think then brings some safety there. But when there's guarded, saying what you think is just filling the space. And like it's helpful to just like wait. Right.
So if you get like a guarded, you would just kind of wait.
Yeah, I would wait. And then a lot of times they'll do this, like their guarded answer a lot of times will be, I don't know. Their I don't know answers also, I don't know. But there's like this dismissive, I don't know, like, I don't know. You know, it's like, I'm not going to try. That's really what they're saying to you is I'm not going to try.
Yeah.
You know, and I think in that moment, like that's when I kind of push against that a little bit going like, yeah, I don't expect you to know. I'm just curious what you think. Like your knowledge is way more than mine. I'm just curious what you think.
Oh yeah. That's cool. I like that.
And it's just this like, one, I'm not letting you off the hook a little.
Okay.
You know? And then two is it's just like, dude, this is casual.
Right.
Like you just made this into a big deal. And I'm like, what? Why are you making this a big deal?
Yeah. I was just wondering.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, why are you making this a thing?
I can see like in a client relationship, you can put a little bit more pressure there. Totally. Right. And as a parent, you may need to like pause and be like, oh yeah, it's fine if you don't want to talk about it. Like, I was just curious. No big deal. Yeah. Move on, and then you could come back around to a different question that felt maybe a little less threatening at a different moment.
Because the goal is like, as a starting point with these conversations with your kid, you want to start with a conversation that's like, oh, this is easy.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to like jump in, the very first thing comes in and be like,
are people having sex?
Yeah, are people having sex at your school?
Yeah.
You know, like that's like the last thing you want to start with, right? Like you want to start with something that's so easy. And that's like, I love this like Valentine's Day conversation we had, or like dance conversation we have, or like prom is coming in the spring kind of question, right? Like those are like very normal and things that parents are probably already doing.
Right.
You know,
probably.
I just think I watch parents enter in at this like, so what's your plan for prom? You know, it's like, oh, like you just like put so much pressure there, right? When if you was just like what is like I don't know, like what do people think of prom in your school? Is it like a cool thing to go, or is it kind of lame?
Yeah.
You know? And like you're starting again in this really safe way. And then it's like what about your friends? Do you think your friends are going to end up going?
Yeah.
You know? And then it's like, okay, like would you like to go? You know? And like eventually you can get there. But if you start with this like, so what's your plan with prom? Like you just put a ton of pressure on that child.
Oh, totally. I love that.
I think there are even some of these, like they really exist kind of everywhere, right? And like you could do them with really easy things like, okay, like what video games are being played at your school, you know? Or like when kids all get together at school, like what do people do when they hang out, you know?
Yeah.
When like everyone gets together at Brian's house, like what do people do?
What do people do? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, or
what
like
brings people together? Yeah.
Yeah. What tech access do people currently have?
Yeah.
You know, like how many of your friends are on Instagram or Snapchat or
YouTube, have YouTube,
TikTok or whatever, you know? Yeah. Like what movies, TV shows, YouTubers, TikTokers get talked about in your school?
Yeah.
Right. Like all these kind of like, they don't have to be about sex.
Right.
You know? And as you set a pattern of having them about anything,
other things for sure,
then I think what sexual things, they'll start to come more naturally.
Yep.
Right. Like another easy one to start with might be like lunch. Like what do kids like do most kids eat school lunch, or do kids bring lunch from home, or do kids go out in high school? You know, like that's a really easy starting point. That's like, let me learn about your world. Like the goal really is to understand their world.
Right.
And like, it really doesn't have to be any of these pressure. I would not start with kissing, touching hands, dating. Like I would avoid those to start with. You know?
I like that. I think you're right. Like setting a pattern of just having conversations about their other aspects of their culture, lots of aspects of their culture. And that's a powerful way to get them to start noticing their culture in a world where the culture is pretty shifty.
Yeah.
You know? And getting them to kind of pay attention.
Yeah. Because really, you're right. It's changing at a whim. Their culture is very liquid. You know? And there really is everything. That's hence, like when they're on their phones, they're exposed to every culture ever.
Right.
You know? Like when I was a kid, I don't know, like I was exposed to farm kid country culture, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know? And like you had to learn to survive in that little realm.
Yeah.
You know? And now their realm is so ginormous.
Right.
That they're struggling with self-identity.
Right, to feel anchored to something.
Too big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Culture is meant to be like kind of this anchor point.
Totally.
And now like that anchor, it's like doesn't know where it's supposed to go.
Yeah. And even in our homes, we can over-invite too many things in. You know, where our home culture has too much, where it's just like, you know, let's be somewhere.
Yeah, I like that.
I just want to review some like major principles from these, like for having these conversations with your kids.
Yes.
Right?
Let's do that.
Don't make the talk the thing you're doing, right? Like this, like, hey, I've got to go get some groceries. Will you come? Or like, hey, I've got to do this project. Will you help me? Like, if you need your kid to do a chore, do the chore with them.
Yeah.
You know, just be like, hey, can I help you clean your room? Or like, hey, I need you to clean your room. Would you like my help?
Yeah.
Right? And now it's about the
activity, the thing you're doing.
Yeah.
And the conversation can come in.
Totally.
I know. I think another important principle is like remembering that we're trying to create safety. So like wherever you're at with your kid, think about like what would be needed in order for me to make this conversation feel really safe. Totally. If that's like a one question, they answer one thing and then I move on. Like I do feel like for me as a parent, I need to be the one to end the conversation before they are wanting out, like before they're pulling away from
before
it.
They feel trapped.
Yeah. And I'm not actually perfect at that at all. But I think that's like my goal as a parent. Like I want to end the conversation, any conversation that has a lot of weight. I want to be the one to end it before they're pulling away.
Totally. Yeah. Right. And like, again, like we want this to go well. So like ask the questions that you think are going to go well.
Yeah.
Like start with there.
Yeah.
You know, and then eventually you'll get to harder questions, but like those, you aren't going to hit those 2 or 3 times and that's okay. Like it doesn't need to be something that's the focus.
Yep.
Right. Have comfort that if you can just approach with curiosity, your kids are going to consider what you would say. You don't have to say it.
Right.
Like any kid who's over the age of 14, like you don't have to teach them. They like know you and they know what they think you would do.
Yeah.
You know, and like let them ask if they don't. Like you don't teach them.
I like that.
Really just try to learn. Right. And then I think that progression, right? Start with culture, then move to their friend group, then move to them. But try to stay away from you questions as a starting point, even in a far along relationship, you know? Like I'll develop these really open relationships with people, and I still will start with like, what do you think other people think? Right? Like we talked about these Valentine's Day conversations I've been having this week. I don't start with, what do you expect on Valentine's Day? I'm like, what do you think women that live within 25 miles of you expect on Valentine's Day? You know? And like, it's so much easier to share about them, this phantom them, than about you.
Right.
You know? And then they naturally start considering like,
what do I think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
You know, and they take everything through what they think.
And then I think too, like utilizing your own stories as not a way to like condemn their culture or to bring like judgment on their culture, but use it as a way to open the door to communication and connection. So like, I know that sometimes if I think like, oh, if I ask this question, my kid's going to go, oh, I know what my mom thinks about that. You know, like the walls are kind of going to go up. Then sometimes I first like to think about a story from my experience growing up that's even different from my current value system of like, that will kind of almost maybe shock them or surprise them. Like, wait, mom did that? Or like mom thought that? Or like mom's friends, what? You know, and then they feel safe like, oh, she can get it if I'm in a place that's not exactly aligned with her value system.
Totally.
She gets that.
It's like, hey, I'm a teen too.
Yeah.
Like I've been a teen.
I've been a teen too. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And I think those are important. Like I think my dad was really good at this, you know, like he would tell us stories about, you know, I remember him talking about school dances and what they would do at school dances. They would sneak off and they would go shoot guns, you know, and just to be like, oh, like this isn't that big a deal.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not like my mom's wondering like, am I always like perfectly living with the strength of youth pathway?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And like that's
they
okay.
Get that there's a variety of things happening in my culture.
Totally.
I think too, like, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, you go.
Like having these conversations with your partner, I think like at the dinner table is really fun for kids to hear. Like my husband asked me like, wait, what was this like for you growing up? And like, oh yeah. And what was this, you know, what was this other thing like for you growing up? And then all of a sudden they hear just kind of this more candid version of mom and dad.
Yeah. Sometimes that group, like even with their friends or with your family, like those group conversations can actually sometimes be easier.
Yeah. I can almost always get more out of my kids' friends than I can my kids. But my kids are sitting there listening to the conversation and to what their friends are saying.
Yeah.
And the same process of like becoming aware of their culture, becoming aware of their friend group, and then thinking like, what do I think about that is happening in your presence. So your values are becoming somewhat of an influence.
Yeah. Which is the dream.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Awesome.
That's awesome. I like totally believe that a parent can succeed with these principles. Like you just start practicing it and it'll start flowing. Trying to help that succeed. Like we're going to do some like demonstrations of this with teenagers, right? Where it's like, let's ask them some questions, show you kind of how this flows.
Yeah.
Right?
That progression.
Yeah. And then also hopefully that can be a resource that maybe you could even listen to with your kid to try to like open this door with some of your teenagers that maybe you don't practice this conversation very often.
Yeah, they can sit and listen and you can pause it and be like, well, what do you think? And they can hear, or you can just listen. And your kid will go through that same process, even just listening to somebody else go through it.
Then we've also like been working on this list of questions that like a parent could use.
Yeah. We're going to link like at the bottom of the podcast, there will be a link that will take you to the website where you can get access to those questions. We have like questions about relationships and physical intimacy and dating and all that kind of stuff. So it'll just kind of help get your brain flowing of what might be important for you to check in with your kids about.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this discussion today. We hope it was valuable for you and your families. Our website, trueconnectionsrecovery.com, has a bunch of resources that you can access to get support from us.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways we're trying to help individuals, right? Whether it's through like individual recovery, like partner support, even like parental support, like how can I set my home up as a place for success?
Yep. We will be putting like technology management resources, other educational tools, or like workshops that might be up and coming in the area. Just
trying to provide ways for like families to feel supported, right? And so all of that you can find there on that website.
The more that this gets shared and like as you talk about it with others that you know, like the discussions kind of flow and we can all grow in this area together.
Yeah, we really succeed as a community.
Yep.
Thank you.